The next topic that we're going to look at is the Green Bay Packers. Now, why are we talking about the Packers again? I hear half the league ask, but because the Packers are in a situation where if they win both their games, they are in the playoffs. The Packers play the Vikings this weekend, and then they host the Lions next weekend. In no harm to the crack here, I almost want the Packers to win this weekend because you want that week 18 matchup. So I'm just going to put it out there now. The Vikings are a great team, and we're going to talk about them down the stretch here. What they've done with O'Connell this season has been superb. But for me, I want to see Green Bay win this week and take Dan Campbell next week and see what happens. The main problem that I have with Green Bay at the minute, though, Mark, is their offense. You know, they go up against the Dolphins on Christmas Day, an enjoyable game for a neutral, but you know they left points out in the field, and it wasn't good enough. Now, if you look at the base data, like Rodgers one interception in the game, they just couldn't get it done. There was no run game or a very, very limited run game. They were 2 for 5 in the red zone. They didn't look comfortable. 2 for 4 in go to goal situations. Um, and there was too much of a reliance placed in Mason Crosby. You are not going to win in this league, certainly in the playoffs, with play like that. So I can see why Packers fans are concerned. You know, as it stands, if they went in as a seventh seed, they would at the moment be playing Minnesota, who are the second seed. Niners are the third seed at the moment. So it's going to mix and change. If you're a Packers fan, you clearly have concerns there, Mark. But you also have concerns about who you could play. Obviously, you play to beat the best, but as it stands at the minute, it looks like they're playing the Vikings or the Niners, and I don't want to be touching the Niners outside of a championship game in a few weeks.
Well, look, the one that they could be playing is the Vikings, and that's where this all started week one, right? When the Vikings out of nowhere beat them on Sunday Night Football, when we were all probably asleep thinking that the Packers were going to win it handy, and why were the schedule makers doing it to us? The Packers go into this game in the weekend 3.5 point favorites. Why would that change if they go and beat them this weekend and you're going into the playoffs and you meet them again? Like, the whole thing is that the Vikings are frauds, right? So when you talk about the Packers fans being concerned, well, they were concerned in week 4, 5, 6 when we were pulling the plug on them, and like people were doing podcasts and we probably fell into it ourselves. We think there's no way the Packers are going to go out of this. The graphics being gone around by, I think, CBS or Fox, one of these people, that they had a 3% chance to make the playoffs only 3 weeks ago, and now it's up to a 1 in 3 chance. So it's massive what they've been able to do. Do I have faith in them? I definitely have a lot more faith than I do around now. Do I have faith in what Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers have proven to us over the last few years? Yes, I think you have to go with what is tried and tested. So if they're able to sneak in, that's the trope that will go against the likes of the Vikings. Oh, how is Kirk Cousins going to play in prime time? How he's going to play in playoff prime time, which is even the next step again. And when they're playing well on offense, I suppose, look, you have to be worried about the status of Christian Watson if you're a Packers fan. I don't know if he's day to day or what at the moment. I know it's Wednesday we're recording this on he's not practicing yet. So we know when he emerged, again, he came out of injury. So look, talk about an injury prone guy. It's definitely Christian Watson. But as soon as he started playing, and look, we talked about him a few weeks ago, I put out the graphic that he had so many touchdowns compared to any of these other guys in the last few weeks. And when he's playing as well as he is, that was what the offense was missing. So it's great when that's involved. And then when you flip to the other side of the board, it's like that pass rush is playing a lot better. The defense was kind of like, just playing a bit below. Every player was playing a bit below where they played in 2021, whereas now it seems to be that they're just playing a bit above themselves again. And the Packers' defense is somewhat capable. Like when you look back through their last few games, like they have been scoring points. I suppose that's it at the end of the day. Some teams, they may be leaving points out on there, like you're saying they did against the Dolphins, but then they still won that game last week. Like when I look back to their games, 26 points, 24 points, 28 points, 33 points they scored, 27 points they scored. It's like this offense is scoring once more, and that was the problem at the beginning of the year, that they weren't able to come away with wins. So the Packers at the moment, if they this week, now this seems as a bit of a stretch, it's not completely out of the realm possibility, but if the Lions lost to the Bears, Commanders lost to the Browns, and the Seahawks lost to the Jets, the Packers would be into the number 7 seed. So it's like they're not a million miles away from this at all. I do think I would fancy them against the Packers. I'll probably pick them, or sorry, against the Vikings this weekend. Which, yeah, I suppose makes it interesting for the rest of us, right?
Absolutely, and Michaela, I'm picking the Packers to beat the Vikings this weekend as well, just for the sheer crack factor in Week 18. And Mark's right, we are recording this on the Wednesday. Things happen when we're recording. It looks as if at the time of recording that Derek Carr will be sitting against the Niners. to try and fix up some contract situations this weekend as well. So things happen all the time in this league. One thing that you can look at with Christian Watson, Michaela, is the Packers forgetting about Watson and forgetting about Dobbs. As a team, they do need to try and find different gear. They need to play better. But people will, I guess, some will argue the team were 4-8. They now have a chance as they enter the last few weeks of the season, and I guess fair play to them.
I don't think it's fair play. I'm actually furious that they're into a playoff contention now. I'm kind of like, they started. I know I'm saying,
Michaela,
oh yeah,
I
the
genuinely
Lions
think they're a
are.
better team than the Giants or Washington football team or Commanders. I think I
Oh,
think they deserve to be there based on the last month's play, more so than Washington. I think Daniel Jones has got a bit better, and I was impressed with him last week against Minnesota. But I just I look at that Washington playoff spot at the minute. I think it's a waste. So I agree with what you're saying, but it's just it's a weird situation.
oh yeah, yeah. It's Washington are definitely a waste, and I feel like Washington do sneak into the playoffs every year. But then again, looking at it, the Packers are always in the playoffs every year as well. Obviously, because they were a top end team in the NFL, they were one of the best. They were probably the best in the NFC. Them and the 49ers, if you were looking at last season, and then obviously the Rams as well. But to kind of like, if it was the Rams in this situation, I'd still be furious because I'm like, no, you're a top end team. You should have been in contention the whole time, and the fact that you've just kind of started sneaking in a little bit now is kind of infuriating. I want to mix up sometimes, so I want to see it to be the Lions. I want it to be the Jaguars, even though they could probably get knocked out in the wild card game. It's still interesting, and it just still shows you that these teams and the draft and like it all works because new teams are getting into the playoffs every year, where it's kind of like, for me, I'm sick of kind of every season the Aaron Rodgers drama, and I'm sick of the same storyline of, oh, they don't have receivers, they don't get receivers for him. So when they were playing Purley, I was kind of like, well, it is surprising. Like, it was obviously surprising, but it's kind of like, I don't feel bad for them because it's just the same storylines with this team over and over again. No receivers. Aaron Rodgers is thrown a hissy for some reason. He's going to get traded to Denver. So like, I was kind of happy that they kind of fell into the background and they weren't being talked about. And then it's also infuriating that Aaron Rodgers is like, what, MVP twice in a row, and then everyone was hailing him for like the no interceptions thing, and now he's just, every time you check his stats or you watch him play a game, he throws an interception. So I was more than happy to not see the Packers in the playoffs this year. But if they do make it into it, like, fair play, they got hot at the right moment. I don't think they deserve it. But I'm going with the Vikings this
When you
week.
I
look
don't
at their
think
last few
anybody wants to play.
when you look at their last few games, Michael, like the Packers, when Michaela says that they got hot at the right time, look, the opposition hasn't been amazing. The Dolphins, Rams, Bears, Eagles, their last three games, obviously the Eagles are amazing, but they've only conceded 6 points in the fourth quarter since that Eagles game, which was a 44-33 or 44-33 or something. It was a high scoring game. Like they'd put it up to the Eagles. So like when you talk about getting hot, they absolutely did. And they did get the receiver now, as it turns out, with Christian Watson. So when we all say, oh, we want to see that storyline checked, that has been checked off now. So it's like we can't really fault them. We always come back to these storylines, and sometimes it's through laziness, sometimes because the coaching is that good, and the coaching got them out of the hole. That's why we're all so jealous of, oh, why are those teams always there? Why are the Patriots always thereabouts? Why do we put such faith in McVay every single year? Why did we put into the playoff talks Kyle Shannon every single year, even though he hadn't been getting there in his first couple of years with the 49ers? It's because they are that good, and they're proving it again, that when there's hissy fits and all thrown, they worked through it and they're in with a shout. And in this year where so many teams are all kicking themselves saying the playoffs were there for so many teams, it's the Packers that stood up and were counting and said, yeah, actually, we'll take that spot. The Lions were in contention. The Commanders were in contention. The Giants were in contention. But like at the end of the day, the Packers are the ones that are going sorting out business and have given themselves a stretch of 2 games that will get them into the playoffs. It's as simple as that. It's like we can't be jealous. Every team was allowed to do it.
Yeah, I think it's a fair enough point, mate. Like, I mean, I take on board with what you both said there. I am intrigued by these next 2 weeks. I think the way that the Packers started the season, they went from London to about a month ago, was pretty atrocious in some situations. And I think the way that, and people are giving Mac Jones a lot of guff on the field for the way he's going on. Rogers has been very direct at some points in the field as well. So look, let's see what happens. I would definitely like to see the Packers in there as a 7th seed, just for, again, the sheer neutral factor.